Okay, we're recording. Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
so just for the recording sake, so we're interviewing Daniel Alarcon, Alarcon,
Alarcon.
Alarcon,
Alarcon.
Alarcon,
Yeah.
on the student activists, as a student activist who protested during the 1996 ethnic studies protest at Columbia. And yeah, hello.
Hi, Audrey.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to ask you like just a free few like general questions, and then maybe we could start from there. Honestly, it could go anywhere. So
Yeah.
so um so what was your, affiliation to Columbia University at the time of the strike?
I was a first year student.
Mhm.
I'm class of 99. So I arrived in New York on August of 95, I
Hmm.
suppose. Um, and so over the course of the fall, there was, it's that first sort of um, kind of chaotic moments of college when you're trying to figure out where you fit in and who your friends are and what your interests are and navigate a big institution like Columbia. So there's a lot of sort of like it's very heady days, and I don't I don't know when I sort of met older Latino students on campus, but I remember a couple of names. I remember meeting Rafael Collasos very pretty early on, and he invited me to some kind of meeting.
Mhm.
Um, I remember going to a to a meeting at the old Ferris Booth Hall, which was the student center, um, and then meeting more people. I remember there was the I want to say it was the Black Students Organization had a magazine called Roots and Culture,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, that I was in, I started writing for, um, and and so these were sort of like a lot of people. You get to college and you're sort of like finding your way and finding your place.
Right. Right.
And then I started talking to, it was very clear that the older students had been planning, had been agitating for something for a very long time,
Mhm.
and it was coming to a head. And there was a number of meetings in the fall and early spring that I recall,
Mhm.
um, uh, where quite frankly it was sort of like presented as a debate, like these are some ideas, but it was
Right.
actually the decision, as far as I learned later, had already been taken as to
Mhm.
what the action would be.
Mhm.
Um, and and I remember being really surprised. My friend Antonio, who was just a first year like me, was like, okay, I'm gonna go on hunger strike too.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and that was like, very surprising. And because it did feel like everyone else, they're making it, when you're 18, people who are 22 seem like remarkably adult and hugely, mature, and like they all know what they're doing. Now that I'm in my mid 40s, I realize that I still don't know what I'm doing,
Mhm.
and I certainly didn't when I was 22. But at the time, like you look up to people because they've been there for 4 years, they know their way around, they know professors, they know how the institution works, and so you're like, wow, okay, these people are really onto something. And so then you sort of get caught up in it. And I think that there's another thing that I think is important. I think that for a lot of the students who've been there for 4 years, they had time to settle into they understood the contours of their grievance
Mhm.
better than I did, certainly,
Mhm.
um, because I was still sort of learning the space, so I hadn't bumped up against the walls that they had bumped up against.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And so when you started so you became sort of involved, you sort of had connections and were listening and were like tuning into this whole um process since like the fall eventually, but what really, you say what you really got you was one of your friends joining in the hunger strike.
Yeah, yeah, and then feeling like I had to do something to
Mhm,
support him, you
mhm,
know?
mhm.
And I started like where I sort of landed, and I can't remember if this was Raphael or one of the older folks that sort of pushed me into this, or if I volunteered. I honestly have no memory, um, or I don't have a precise memory. But I ended up working with the media people, like there was
Uh-huh,
a crew of us writing,
right.
press releases and doing interviews and being kind of spokespeople. And I worked very closely with a guy named Jamal,
Mhm, mhm,
Darius Jamal von Sleitman,
mhm, mhm.
um, who was, and that was for me, just on a personal level, like, he was like impossibly cool, like, and I was like this really nerdy kid from, you know, like I'm Peruvian. I'd grown up in Alabama.
Mm.
The could hardly be like a less cool combination. Um, and then arriving in New York and feeling completely like, what are you doing here? Kind
What
of
else? Like, wow,
not fitting in. Yeah. And Jamal was, like knew his way around the city really well. I think he'd grown up in Harlem. And just like, I don't, he was just super nice to me. And we
mm.
had a really, really a blast. Like, I think that that's something that gets lost in the kind of like in the political discussion around it, is just how much fun it was,
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
you know, and not just the camaraderie. Also, coming out of winter into the spring when this started happening, like it was like the weather changed with the mood. There was like moments of jubilation and like springtime, and there were parties.
Mhm.
Um, and there was just so much sense of community, in that really brief spell of time. But it was really intense, and I don't remember. I don't know how we did went to classes and stuff, but I do remember going to classes.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, it does sound like, especially from the interviews that I've done, like, that that as you described, like, the comradeship and the whole sort of community that was built around that intense movement was really strong, and I think it really did go on to influence, like, not only the seniors when they were, going off to their career path, but, like, they literally formed, like, completely new friend groups, like, from that time on, and that proceeded from there. So I
Yeah.
honestly think that that's one of the, like, greatest achievements, like, besides the concessions that the administration might have given, it's one of the, like, greatest achievements that community, right?
Well, it's certainly one of the most lasting achievements. Like I'm still friends with Marcel. We
Mhm,
we talk all the time. I have a really funny moment that I remember that
mhm,
you'll laugh in particular because
mhm.
so in 1990, 95, 96, having a like people still had beepers,
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
like pagers, right?
right, right.
Um, and we someone got us a cell phone, which we used um, for media outreach.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um,
Whoa.
and this was a time when if you answered a cell phone, everyone was like, "What an asshole." It's like, who does this guy think he is? Like a Wall Street trader? Like
Oh,
that's the kind of like no one had cell phones,
uh-huh.
Like I didn't get my first cell phone until after I graduated from college.
Oh,
So
wow.
which would have been like 5 years later.
Right, right, yeah.
Um, so I didn't have a pager, I didn't have anything.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
I remember my friend Andre Morales, who lives in LA now. Andre was um, given the phone to keep, to answer press calls,
Mhm, mhm,
and I happened to be in a class with him, and he walked in, and the phone was dying, so he plugged it in one corner of the classroom,
mhm.
and the teacher's giving a lecture or something. We're one of these small classrooms, like
Right.
in like Hamilton or something like
That
that,
part. Yeah, 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 definitely.
and the phone rings in the middle of class, and it's not a time when anyone is accustomed to a phone ringing or pinging. Like there were no phone, like it was just super weird.
Yeah.
And I remember he got up and walked across the room in front of the professor to grab the phone, and then like it was like flipped it open and was like, "This is Andre," and then walked out of the classroom into the hall.
Whoa. Power
And
move.
yeah, but this was such a funny thing to do. Like I can't explain to you at the time, everyone was like appalled, like,
Yeah. Oh,
you
definitely,
know,
definitely.
because like no one ever did that. It's so funny to me now because it's like, you go to a party and everyone's staring at their phones. But but back then this was just like so strange.
Yeah, oh,
I remember
definitely,
we
yeah.
looked at this phone was like an object of fascination and repulsion at the same time. Very funny, very, very funny.
How's the professor's reaction?
Oh, probably disgusted. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to ask Andre. Um, but but I remember this vividly because Andre also wore like these long black coat.
Uh-huh.
He's from Chicago, and he was also like super cool
Mhm,
dude, and I was
mhm.
like I said not, and so just to see him sort of like confidently stride across the classroom to grab the phone, it was just so funny.
That's such a look, like the man with the long black coat just like walking
Yeah,
across. Yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Oh,
yeah.
that's a great story actually. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that was actually what I was gonna ask, like, looking back, if there's like anything that like really stands out to you or like is memorable to you, but
Yes. So there's another. So you probably have heard the story of the day after. So we took over the library and stayed
right?
there one night.
Mhm,
Um, and I remember sleeping on the rotunda,
mhm,
on the floor. And then the next morning there was a rally,
mhm.
and I was not. I mean, I was nobody. I was just the kid. But for some kind of randomness of the of the situation, I was standing next to the president of the BSO,
Mhm.
um, whose name I can't remember right now.
I think Shared X? Shared X?
No, no, it was not Sharad X. No, no,
Oh.
no, 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 no. It was actually so it was the head of the USCC, United Students of Color Council,
Oh.
because Sharad was super controversial for a number of reasons and had written a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but at least one like very anti-Semitic, horrific editorial
Mhm,
that
mhm.
was published in the Spectator.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he was a wild dude. Like uh he was Sherrod Baker, then Sherrod X.
Right.
And I met it. I didn't know him very well,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
but I knew him. I mean, I want to say this guy's name was Omari.
Mhm, mhm,
I don't know if that name rings a bell, but anyway,
mhm.
whoever it was, for some reason, he was giving a speech to the gathered students in front of the library, and for some random reason, I was holding the megaphone.
Oh.
So he was talking into this, and I was just holding the megaphone.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
I had my hair was much bigger than it is now. And he's giving the speech, and I was like, yeah, 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 and everyone's like cheering. And he's a
Uh-huh.
really good speaker, and I'm literally just the guy holding the megaphone, like nothing of importance at all. And then I felt this like, and I'm like holding my phone, I go like that, and this bird had pooped on my head,
Oh, no.
and like in the middle of
This
this thing.
whole Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, yeah. So this remarkably, this has happened to me like more than a dozen times in my life. Like by that point, it had been at least 10 times, and
Oh, wow.
so
Mhm.
yeah. So I think it's just I don't know about mostly about my hair, and so I I knew what this was immediately because it had happened so often, like
Oh,
many times.
you knew the
So
feeling.
I was like, well, that's disgusting, and so I passed there was someone there, and I was like, hey, can you hold on to this? I gotta go. So I gave them the megaphone, ran to my room in Shapiro,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and I was gone for like half an hour. I went, showered, changed, came back. And when I came back, everyone had been arrested.
Oh, wow.
It
Oh. Oh, that was oh.
was
Oh,
exactly at that moment. Yeah, yeah,
oh, wow. I guess the
and
bird was trying to help in some way.
yeah,
Maybe no, so now I get it. I thought that, like, once the people had, like, marched out of the entrance, then, like, they were simultaneously arrested. No, so, like, there was a rally, people were participating in that, and then the NYPD. Oh,
that's my memory of it for
uh-huh. No,
sure.
no, no, but that makes
Yeah,
sense, that makes sense, that makes sense,
yeah.
actually. Mhm,
And so actually, because everyone was arrested,
mhm.
um, I was sort of like de facto promoted. And the next night, that day, it was like me and Jamal were the only ones on the media team who hadn't been arrested.
Rested.
And
Ooh.
so me and Jamal started working like, and this was like a week or 10 days into it. This was like the intense last period, if my memory is
Mhm.
correct.
Definitely.
Um, and because that was before we took over Hamilton and had the big party in Hamilton.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But anyway, it was very funny, very, very funny and random. And it also sort of, it's like, because we were like alone out on like, like we, hastily, I connected with Jamal, and we were like, well, I guess we're the only last one standing. We should,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
get to making phone calls and doing press and stuff. So that was very, very intense.
Oh, wow. So now you're like, you're the 2 people that were, saved by the
Saved
weird
by the, I don't
saved
know what he was saved by. I don't think anyone
uh-huh,
pooped on him. It was just
uh-huh.
me. It was just me. But
Oh, yeah, yeah. How was it to, because I imagine, especially because I've heard and, like, read that, like, from the moment of the arrests and, like, the overreaction from the institution, that's when, like, the media really started, like, exploding over the whole,
yeah,
like, protests. So how was
yeah,
it, like, taking care of that for, like, a two-person group who've, like, just been promoted?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was. I remember it being very intense, and I remember we had so much fun because we would write these press releases and fax them out to people.
Mhm.
Um, but then we would be up all night, like sort of responding to emails and chatting, and we would, you get into that like sort of late night delirium.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember that we would write these fake press releases that we would just for us, that were
Uh-huh,
like,
uh-huh, uh-huh. It's really fun.
yeah, like President Rupp, eaten by a giant monster, or like, um, administrators forced to translate, diplomas into Spanish or something like that. Like really absurd things that were just like just to make us laugh. Um, and then I remember also that we would trade off the role of writing updates to like groups of supporters around the country.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and that was always like a fun little, exercise.
mhm, mhm.
Um, I mean, I work as a journalist now, so I think it's interesting. I haven't really thought much about it, but like how much that might have served as de facto training, you know, for for what I do now,
Oh,
in
definitely,
terms
yeah,
of writing these reports and the intensity of being there, and sort of like being eyes on the ground.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a 4-day, intensive seminar on, like, "Okay, this is journalism.
Yeah,
Get
exactly.
ready for that."
Exactly.
No, yeah. That's
Yeah.
oh, that's oh, you're bringing such wonderful, like, colorful stories, and I'm I'm so glad, yeah. No, no,
Oh, good.
yeah. Oh, that's great, okay. So, and, you say and I've, like so after, like, you became the press like, everyone was arrested, and then you sort of, as a group, like, the committee sort of decided to move the occupation into Hamilton Hall, right? Like,
Hmm.
did you play a role in that decision? Like, was it, like, a response to the
No.
Mhm.
It must have been a response. Like yeah, I think I want to be super clear that I was nobody in this. I was just like just a kid.
Mhm.
I was 18 years old. I was a freshman. Um, I was there mostly out of admiration and in solidarity with my friend Antonio. Um, and I just did what I could, and it was very social for me. And like the kind of most, as you mentioned, the most lasting impact was this kind of revelatory discovery of like who your community was or could be, you know?
Absolutely.
And that was really powerful for me. So to do all these transgressive things with, to be frank, an 18-year-old's very vague understanding of the pedagogical underpinnings of this center and this discourse and this, academic discipline that I didn't even have a major. Like, how would I know what should be an academic discipline or not?
Oh,
you know?
absolutely, absolutely.
Um, like I didn't even know, I ended up majoring in anthropology,
Mhm, mhm, mm.
and creative writing, and I just didn't have the tools to make those judgment calls. But the people who were in charge or leading, a lot of them were grad students of education. That you talked to a lot of the Asian American cohort. Like there were some really, Tomo and uh, Jane Lee. I
Mhm,
want to say,
yeah.
yeah, these
Yeah.
really, really. I mean, they were like mythological to me because they were so
Oh,
smart and so
wow.
they were so sort of in charge of themselves, like sort of like self-possessed, and
Mhm,
they seemed to be like I had this intense admiration for them. Marcel as well,
mhm,
because they seemed to me to have this unattainable sense of self
mhm.
and self confidence that I just completely lacked.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
um, which is normal. I was 18. I was super young. Um, and so for me, it was very much that discovery. So like to do something like have a party in Hamilton, you
Mhm.
know, and just be around, not even be one of the people, but just be around people who felt to me that cool, was just like, wow.
Oh,
And no,
definitely.
and no one sort of like questioning whether I should be there or not, you know?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's really, you do describe yourself as like as, like a nobody, but you showed up for every single one. You were like, at the low library rotunda, you're at, Hamilton Hall. And what I guess like, even the sort of like nucleus group of like decision makers were also, aiming for is to have that kind of like support and community. So I think that, you know, and yeah, I think you were like a definite part of the movement. And for me as well, from like a student who's like just graduated, but just a senior, like looking back into like the 25 years, like I'm just blown away by the kinds of like things that these students as a group just like accomplished and were motivated to do. It's just mind blowing to me. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Audrey, we I remember one night really in particular where uh Ben Jealous came to talk to us. Do you know who that is? Does that name ring a bell? Benjamin Jealous?
Benjamin Jealous.
Yeah.
Was he a community?
No, he had been a student. He's most well known now because he was director of the NAACP for a long time.
Oh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
But at the time, he was like a recent graduate of Columbia, a relatively recent graduate of Columbia, and he came to talk to us about the student movement for divestment from apartheid,
Oh, right,
which
right.
had been a decade earlier.
Oh, like the 1968.
No, no, not
Oh,
1968. In the 80s,
oh, 80s.
there
Right.
in the 80s there was a movement. 80s and early 90s there was a movement across universities in the United States to get the university endowments to divest from
The-
apartheid South Africa,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what's amazing about that is like he came and told us his stories of student activism, which included like, if I recall correctly, somehow breaking into the top level of Butler and like hanging this giant banner
Oh,
across the face of Butler calling for
right.
divestment.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, and things like that were very inspiring. So that we were like, and he told us his stories, and they felt like, and gave us his advice, and sort of, and that was, I'm sure he had other private meetings with Marcel and that cohort, but to talk to the broader group, I just
Mhm.
remember being very, very, impressed by that, and thinking, okay, well, there's an earlier generation that did something important,
Yeah.
using the university as a vehicle
Yes.
for change and making a statement. So we also have to do that as well. And you know, and then it just the ball gets rolling, and it's interesting to see, like, I see him on like CNN and MSNBC
Mhm,
talking about
mhm.
voting rights and
Yeah,
all
so
this other stuff, and it's really interesting to be like, oh, okay, I remember that guy when he was like in his late 20s
mhm, mhm.
talking to us who were in I was in my late teens,
Wow.
and that kind of, it's like almost like passing the baton.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so and I think that story is like so pertinent, especially, because it really, it started from the 1968 protest, and then they gave that was also like, you know I think divestment from the Vietnam War,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like, yeah, and then
right.
it sort of like went on to like the apartheid, like South Africa, and also from like the sort of like gentrification of Morningside, and then it's sort of like it's really like a lineage of different
Yeah,
movements. And I think
yeah.
another protest, I don't remember when it exactly was, but another sort of like hunger strike was held in like commemoration of the 1996
Oh, well, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah, 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 you're
right,
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 yeah,
right. And I
yeah.
think they also like came to like came to you guys for like, I think like Marcel and like Jane and just a number of people like wrote a letter in support of like the protest of like the 2005
Mhm,
to, yeah, something like that. So yeah, it
yeah,
really is like a literal passing of the baton that
yeah,
occurs every decade, every, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I remember, I think 68, the spark was, if I recall correctly, Columbia was trying to build a gym. They
Yes,
were gonna take over Morningside Park
right.
and make it a gym, and basically in solidarity with the neighborhood, there was an alliance of outraged students and outraged residents who combined to force the university to back down from that
Yes.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what I remember. Um, the oh, I wanted to mention one thing that I do remember very clearly is I remember I talked to my dad and mom before this started, and
Mhm.
they knew a doctor in New York.
Mhm.
And I remember calling that doctor on because my parents knew him to ask him what basically what kind of what should people on hunger strike drink,
Oh, gotcha. Mhm.
and sort of like medically, you
Right.
know. um and he very kindly sort of said, well, electrolytes and Gatorade, things like that, with sugar, and then maybe in anticipation they should eat these foods before. And I remember sort of like being assigned, I don't know if I must have been assigned this task or volunteered for this task,
Mhm.
and then like made a call, took a bunch of notes, and came back and presented this to Marcel and
Mhm.
the crew.
Mhm.
So that would have meant that I was involved before it started, and it sort of dovetails well with my memory of being just basically like Tony Antonio being like, "Hey, I'm going to do this,"
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
me being like, "Whoa, okay, well then let me help."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the hunger strike, like the fact that they were going to, decide on this method specifically was definitely decided like way before, because I think
Yeah,
like the April 1st like date was like intentionally chosen like as like, okay, this is the date we're gonna like begin. So I'm
yeah,
definitely sure there was like months of planning before. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I remember because, and this is a very small detail, but in one of those meetings, they were about to tear down Ferris Booth Hall, right?
Oh. Hmm.
Ferris Booth Hall was the where Lerner sits now.
Right,
And I
right.
and I remember telling this. I remember at one of these planning meetings in the fall, suggesting an alternate plan, which
Hmm.
was like, I was like, the university has everything invested in emptying out Ferris Booth Hall to start this construction. What if we just don't let them? What if we take sort of do an occupation of Ferris Booth Hall
Hmm.
until they come to negotiate with us?
Oh, hmm.
Um,
Because that was the most like covetous sort of.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I was like, it would entail a lot to sort of like, how do you take over a building and hold on to it for, however many days. Um, and I remember later Marcel telling me that he thought that was a really good idea, and that he found it to be like surprising and interesting and impressive, but
Hmm.
that the decision had already been made. That meeting was entirely a pantomime, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
because they'd already made a decision they were going to do that. But he was like, I want you to know that that was a cool idea. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Maybe it's some future protesters like coming,
yeah,
they can heed and they can, re enlighten that idea
yeah.
someday. Yeah.
Well, it just
Yeah,
seemed
yeah.
to me logical that there's this thing that they really wanna do if you make it so they can't do it,
Yeah, it's they're
you
supposed
know?
they're definitely gonna come to the table, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, so I guess you have to go, but one last question is,
Sure.
yeah. So at the end, like, what was your response to like the whole sort of like conclusion of the strike with like the administration's negotiation decision? And how do you think that sort of influenced your like how do you think the whole movement sort of influenced your path coming afterwards?
Um, so I remember we were in Hamilton when they came with the news. Basically, it was a mixture of like the university relenting and the university threatening at the same
Right.
time.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there was basically this idea like they're going to expel all of us, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And in fact, they bureaucratically we did have to sign a note saying we'd been expelled and readmitted, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
Um, uh,
Wow.
so a couple things happened. One, I mean, at the time we sort of came to the agreement, it was devastating. It felt like a loss. Like I
Mm.
remember crying in Hamilton, and a lot of people being just like, but I think it was just the exhaustion, my own immaturity of not understanding like this is how politics works. You know, you push for the moon and you take, what you can get, and it's.
Mhm.
I do think that incremental progress is still progress.
Mhm. Oh,
You know,
definitely. Yes.
and I think it makes me immensely proud to think that you went through the center, like
Yeah,
something that didn't exist got created because of this.
absolutely.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
um so I find that to be astonishing. um I think the way it affected me, a couple of ways. One is these friendships that I had with folks like Marcel, with and
Mhm.
my solidified my friendship with Antonio,
Definitely.
um who's still one of my very best friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Another kid, Agustin and Andre, and
Mhm.
um, Janine
Mhm.
Dinoves. I don't know if you know her or
Mhm,
talked to
mhm.
her.
I've read her name a couple
Yeah,
of times.
Janine was a force, a total force. Angelique, um, Angelique is actually my son's English teacher now in high
Oh,
school.
wow.
Yeah,
Funny how these things turn out. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, so it's incredible. Yeah, no, so it's like I see these people and it's like this kinship and this, like when I went to like a parent teacher conference and I walked in and it was Angelique. It was like everyone freaked out and big hugs and oh my
Oh,
god, I hadn't seen her in 15 years. So that um I think it also in some ways it made my college experience much easier because I had my community. There was also a dean that I don't know that if Marcel mentioned Dean McDermott, Dean Kathleen McDermott.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
She was so great. She passed away about a decade ago, very young, but she was great because she was the one whose job it was to sort of expel us and readmit us.
Mhm.
But she turned into such an advocate and a friend and an ally,
Oh,
um, and was just a wonderful human being, like a
oh,
totally. And over the course of the next several years, like literally our first interaction was her expelling me.
mhm.
Um, but she became such a friend and such an ally and very supportive. And whenever I had a problem, so it was like this a university is made up of many individuals,
Levels, yeah.
and
Mhm.
there's the machinery of the institution,
Right,
and
right,
then there are people who are trying to do their job as best they can. And
right.
she was one of them. She was just
Definitely.
really a very very special woman.
Def
If you ask Marcel about her, he'll say the same thing. He was
Sure, sure.
very
Could
cool.
you remind me of her name again? Dean Catherine
Kathleen McDermott.
Kathleen McDermott. Gotcha, gotcha,
Yeah, she
gotcha.
passed away. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think she worked also with Janine, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, she was just a lovely woman.
Gotcha,
Um,
gotcha. No, I
yeah,
mean it's great to learn that, it established relationships not only among like students and the like everyone from the institution were this like hostile, but eventually something was formed and like even though they couldn't do it because of they couldn't, like warm up to it because of their jobs. I mean, they were individually like really
Yeah,
freeing
yeah,
and on terms. Yeah, that's
yeah.
completely. Yeah. No, that's really great. And I also want to thank you on behalf of, this year's Zoom 2021 graduates of
Yeah,
Caesar. We had wonderful like majors and concentrators. Right now, like Caesar has I think like I'll like email you with like some of the details, but it's sort of like grown to like a massive force right now. Many people are majoring or concentrating in it. Like we're having different classes offered in like the summer, the fall. We have like a summer program at Mexico. It's really just such
that's great.
an experience. Yeah. And as an international student, I really completely agree that like, as a freshman, when you come into the school, you're like where am I? Like I
Hmm.
just don't fit in. Like complete imposter syndrome from like beginning to end. But
Yeah,
still, like I felt that like the center of race and ethnic studies, and like the first class, like the introduction to comparative ethnic studies that I took, it literally just provided me a safe space and a home, and it's been like that like ever since.
oh,
So
that's so
I
great.
yeah, I really want to just thank you on behalf of
Oh, thank you.
yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you, Audrey. I'm so glad to hear that, and that makes
No,
me
no,
very, very
no,
happy.
no, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um, Awesome. Okay, well, I have someone already in my waiting room, so let me let you
Oh,
go. But
gotcha.
thank you so much. It was really fun chatting with you. And if you need any help, if you email me and remind me, I can maybe put you in touch with Antonio. And yeah, have a great summer. Congratulations on graduating too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.